Hello, my name is Laura Payne. This is my video presentation for Christian ethics. My topic will be contraception. The specific ethical issue that I chose for this presentation is which contraceptives are ethically permissible for married Christian couples. So first I'm going to define some terms. The first one is fertilization. So this is when the sperm fertilizes the egg. The second one is contraception, which literally means against conception. That root word contra means against. And abortion is purposefully terminating the life of a fertilized egg. So starting off here, there are many forms of birth control, and some of them are ethically permissible, but some of them aren't. So I'm going to go through 5 types of birth control. The first one being no birth control. This is when the married couple chooses to trust the Lord and just enjoys marital sex and is not worried about if they're going to get pregnant or not. They take no precautions except for praying and trusting in God's will for their life of whether or not they get pregnant or not. So that one is no birth control. The next form of contraception is natural birth control. This is when the married couple abstains from vaginal sexual intercourse whenever the wife is likely to be fertile. So the woman goes through a time of ovulation, and that is when she's most likely to be fertile for several days, and the couple would not have sex during that time during the month, and the couple can use like a calendar method where they're counting days to see when she's ovulating, or they can use a body temperature method where the woman takes her temperature every day, and seeing the fluctuation of the temperature will tell her when she's ovulating and different things about her cycle during her month. And so that is natural birth control. The next form of contraception is non-abortive birth control. So this form of contraception goes along with the natural birth control. So the timing and counting the days or the temperature, and during those days that the woman is most fertile, like I said previously, the couple would not abstain from having sex, but they would temporarily use barrier methods. And so some of these temporary methods are condoms, spermicide, diaphragm, and cervical caps. There's also permanent birth control methods that are non-abortive. So these are like female sterilization or vasectomy. And these are when the wife or husband undergoes surgery to have basically have their tubes tied, and so they are not fertile anymore. So that is the non-abortive birth controls. The next form of contraception is potentially abortive birth control. So these contraceptives are the hormonal ones. So some of these would be like the pill, the vaginal ring, the contraceptive patch, contraceptive injections, and the intrauterine devices. So these add chemicals and hormones in the woman's body. So these types of birth control are only for women to take. And they are potentially abortive, and I'll explain that a little bit more in later in this presentation, but they can be safe, and at times they can be abortive. So that's the potentially abortive birth control. The last form of contraception is abortive murder. And so I'm not going to go into much detail about this, defining it, but it is killing a fertilized egg or taking a human life. There's several medical procedures to remove the baby, and again, I won't go into details of those. My thesis for this project is I would argue that the only forms of contraception that are ethically permissible for Christian married couples are no birth control, natural birth control, and non-abortive birth control. Potentially abortive birth control and abortion are not ethically permissible. So the first argument is that life begins at conception or fertilization. This just means that when the egg and the sperm meet, 23 chromosomes from the mother and 23 chromosomes from the father combined, and the unique genetic makeup of the individual is determined. This is also known as the zygote. Also, after this process, the zygote is continuing to develop into more cells, and then it attaches to the woman's uterine wall, and the baby continues to develop. So that argument is that life begins right when that egg and that sperm meet. And these 2 points just describe that life is unique, and it's continuing to develop. The second argument for this thesis is that the combination of estrogen and progesterone in hormonal contraceptives could, if there was a fertilized egg, prevent implantation. So this means that if there's a fertilized egg, it would not be able to continue to develop and reproduce new cells because it would not be able to implant in the wife's uterine walls. Therefore, it would die. And like we said in the first argument, life begins at conception. Also, any form of contraception that causes the uterine walls to deteriorate, so this would be some of those possibly abortive birth controls, that would not allow the zygote to attach to them, would be killing the baby, since the life of the baby began at conception. The third argument is that the hormonal birth controls can be very harmful to women right now, and they can cause harm to future births and their children in the future. So it doesn't make sense that a woman would selfishly take hormonal birth control right now and cause either deformities or defects in their children in the future, or it could also be very hard or different kinds of pain for the woman in the future during her pregnancy if she had taken hormonal birth control in the past. So that's the third argument for our thesis. So some personal reflections on this topic. I picked this topic because I personally am getting married soon. So these were things that I had to consider in my own life anyways. And so I basically used this project to kind of do my research on what kind of contraceptions I'm going to use when I get married. And I've also spoken to many women in my church who have different views and opinions on this. But the majority of women hold this standpoint on contraceptions, the standpoint that this presentation argued for. And I also wanted to read this piece, or this part from Psalms. It says, "For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you. When I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them." So this talks about how The Lord knew us individually before we were born, while we were still in our mother's womb, and while we were an unformed substance. I think that verse definitely argues for my thesis for this presentation. Lastly, here are my 7 sources that I used. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'm really excited to watch each of y'all's presentations as well and get the feedback. Thank you so much.